Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your mothers have practically built themselves.
The Utah Central Airport got its beginnings in the late 1930s. It was a creation and a brainchild of a guy named Vern Carter. He had obtained legal access to this land and walked into the brush, staked out the runways, and graded off the weeds and brush and the anthills. Originally, nothing was paved. The runways were gravel, clay, and loam is what they were made of. The longest, which was the one that went northwest to southeast, was 2,750 feet long. This picture of it here was taken sometime during World War II and appeared in the 1945 Army Air Force's Field Directory. Originally, the airfield had 2 wood and metal hangars, the largest of which measured about 56 feet by 52 feet. It was still listed as an active airport in November of 1965. And you can see this picture of the main office building, which was on the north end of the property. And this picture is looking to the north and west. Pretty blank out there, isn't it? Anyway, unfortunately, this was right in the way of the glide path for the international airport. And with the larger jets being flown into the international airport, well, these little planes were just in the way, so they needed to shut this down as a regular airport. So what does this have to do with drag racing? Well, in March of 1964, members of the Salt Lake Valley Quarter Mile Association voted to petition the Salt Lake County Commission to build a drag strip that would conform to NHRA specifications. It was felt that the Salt Lake Raceway was not meeting those standards to have those kind of events. They asked permission for a temporary track to be used until a new track could be built. In February of 1965, a group of Salt Lake men had begun building a drag strip on the south side of 2100 South at 3300 West, here at the old Utah Central Airport. The men included Ralph Reese, Dick Godfrey, Jeff Knapp, Jim Campbell, and Gordon Jensen. It was called Bonneville Drag Strip and was sanctioned by the NHRA. The track was 3,900 feet long, with racing every Sunday during the season. Bonneville had its opening race on May 2nd of 1965. It was in direct competition with the old Salt Lake Raceway, which buckled under and closed. Some of the biggest names in the NHRA came to race at this track. And here in this picture you can see far in the background the old office for the airport. Pretty neat. And just some random pictures I've got here of racing that went on. Now, there were a lot of very notable local racers. And I don't want to leave anyone out, so I'm not going to name anybody right now. But suffice it to say, at some point in time, we'll cover more of some of these people who actually raced out here at the old Bonneville Raceway. And you can see the return, part of the return area here, headed to the starting line. The tower that was on the west side of the track, and that retaining wall there on the west side of the track. We saw the stands there earlier. Now check out this building right here. We're going to come back to this building in just a minute. Oh, wow, look at those. The old slingshot top fuelers. Love them. Oh, absolutely love those. Beautiful, beautiful vehicles. Okay, so these buildings, they're on the east side. They were built sometime in the late 60s. Hey, check this out, the office in the background there. Anyway, we're going to come back and talk about those buildings here in just a minute. Here's a great black and white shot of that little car running against looks like a 64 Comet. I had a friend, Bill Chastain, who ran a 63 Comet and used to race against Larry Miller, who was a very famous local racer who had a Falcon. So this car just really gets me going. This beautiful Cougar funny car, 67 Cougar funny car. You can see the lights that they had there on this particular track. This is one of the best pictures, or probably the best picture I found of the Christmas tree there. Well, that Cougar raced for Lake, Lincoln, and Mercury. And if that sounds familiar, remember this building from about a year ago? One of the shows I did that had to do with like the second anniversary of the channel. Well, Lake, Lincoln, Mercury. Originally, this building was a Nash building. Was a Nash dealership, and you can see it in this beautiful picture here, taken from about that same angle. Wow, absolutely amazing. Anyway, it was a Lincoln Mercury dealership in the late 60s, early 70s, and the car was painted blue at one point in time. You can see there, and then it was repainted white. And all of these shots here taken at the old Bonneville Raceway. Even some color shots, which are very helpful. The black, the white, the blue, the red. Good shot of the chassis and what it looked like. Oh yeah. And this one with top up. Absolutely beautiful. Anyway, here it is, running down the track, and you can see this building in the background. And that building is actually still in existence today. And we're going to check it out when we do our ground investigation here in a few minutes. There were some other Cougars that ran out there. Of course, we all know that that's kind of like my favorite car in all existence is the 67, 68 Cougar. Alright, so I decided to take a little trip out to that area to see what was still there. And there's a little road that winds through the area, and guess what? I find this building. Now, this building is an addition to the original building, so even though it looks similar to the original, it's not the original, but this is a new back end to that building. And it actually is right up against where the drag strip would have been many years ago. So 3270 West is the street on the east side where that building sat. And keep in mind that this Bonneville Raceway was only in existence for 2 years. It was very temporary while they built a new one. This is looking west from the 3270 West corner on 2100 South, where the hangars originally were. That's kind of a neat picture. And this is where the original entrance would have been, looking south into the airport and into the drag strip area. So to help you understand this a little bit better, let's go back to the 1965 photo. On the right-hand side is 3270 West. There's the drag strip right there in the middle. 2100 is at the top of the picture, and 3600 is at the left-hand side. So here in pink on the left-hand side, 3600. At the top is 2100. The drag strip is in black. The long runway, that big long runway, would be in yellow. And 3270 is in the maroon. Now, the original hangar areas, you can see there, I've got them as a red block. The white building that we're talking about is just off of the yellow line, between the yellow line and the maroon line. And the original building is still there, but you can see it's been added onto in the back and added onto and added onto, till finally now it comes right up against where the drag strip used to be. This is a modern aerial, and as you can see, well, pretty much everything is obliterated that had to do with the racetrack and the airport. It's just all gone. The track at the old airport was in existence from 1965 through 1967. Dick Godfrey, manager of Bonneville Raceway, was a major stockholder in that group I mentioned earlier that had purchased a 60-acre site northeast of Magna in 1966. They began building a motorcycle racetrack in June of 66. They hoped to have the drag race strip ready by the spring of 67, when they would move drag racing from the Bonneville drag strip a few miles further west to this site at 6600 West and 2100 South. $250,000 was expended on this racetrack, which included a half-mile stock car oval and a 1.8-mile motorcycle sports car road course. Weather and financial problems delayed the track opening. But the first drag race was held on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, July 23rd and 24th of 1968. A guy named Bob Gee was the original track manager, and this track was almost 3,000 feet long. Now, the track manager when I was out there in the late 70s was a guy named Ron Kraft, and guess what? Ron was a racer in and of his own rights, apparently pro stock. How about that? There's some great pictures here, just a few of them, of some of the more memorable cars that were local here. When I started racing out there in 1979, there was this police car. It's like a 75 Nova police car, had been Salt Lake City police car, and they'd stuck a 454 in it, and it was what they called the Race-A-Cop program, and they would run this stock eliminator class, and you could go out and try and beat him. He ran in the 12-second range, as I recall. Here's a picture of it the last year that RMR was open. Of course, it's gone through some changes, but still around. Now, one story I would like to share with you folks is from this picture here, this Jeff Boast, racing with the FG Ferry sponsorship. This particular Cuda funny car had a rear engine in it. And the funny thing about this is he had purchased this from a guy named Jim Dunn. This used to be the Fireman's Quickie. Jim Dunn had run this car very successfully nationally all over and here in Salt Lake City as well. But this is my favorite picture of that car because, well, there's this 69 Cougar in it. And this particular one, the Salt Lake Smoker, was run by a guy named Mike Reynolds, who became very famous here in Salt Lake racing. Previous to that, however, he had purchased it from this gentleman who had it at one of the World of Wheels car shows here locally. Pretty neat. But originally that car was the old High Country Cougar, the Wins 777, running out of Denver, Colorado. Pretty neat, huh? Anyway, some of my favorites. Here we've got an old Pro Stock Maverick. Yeah, I sure wish I could find one of those. And here we got another Cougar out there running. Wow. Anyway, I'm not going to tell the story of all of these cars because guess what? I'm going to leave that for another part. But one of the local racers who deserves a big thank you for all he's done is Keith Lynch. Now, Keith Lynch, our very own local Keith Lynch, was a multi-year super stock champion. Pretty great accomplishment. And it was really one of the guys I idolized when I was a young teenager coming up through. So we'll talk more about him some other time, but shout out to Keith Lynch Sr. So here I am back in the early 80s at the Strip. I raced a couple of different cars. I did race this Cougar a couple of different times out there, and here I am as a young man with a young family. And here's the Charger that eventually I purchased from my friend Pat Chittister. You can see we ran some real junky stuff back in the day, but you know what? It was a Charger and it was beautiful to me. So back in 1973, Bob Ibsen, he leased the track from the Haynes family, who were the majority owners in that whole group. During his 14 years at the helm, Ibsen made over $600,000 in capital improvements before bowing out after the 1986 season. So he was running the track that whole time that I was out there running. So in late 1973, Bob Ibsen leased the track from the Haynes family, who were the majority owners in that group we talked about earlier. During his 14 years at the helm, he made over $600,000 in capital improvements before bowing out after the 1986 season. Dick Godfrey took over the lease after Ibsen stopped running the track. The track was purchased by Spencer Young in 1995. The Young Automotive Group operated the track, but sold the property in 2014 to Freeport West. But the Young Automotive Group negotiated a 5-year lease so that racing could continue through the 2018 season. Unfortunately, that would be the last season for Rocky Mountain Raceway. The track was raised for commercial development so they could put more stupid warehouses on the west side of Salt Lake that they really don't need, but hey, what the heck, we don't need a drag strip, I guess. Anyway, here I am with my son Thomas at the next to last race. I couldn't go to the last race. It was just too emotional to see something go away like that. So anyway, thanks for joining us, folks. We hope you enjoyed this, and stay tuned for some other parts coming up that we will be talking about some of the other cars, the history of some of the cars that ran out here.